Hi, my name is Alexis Mora. I'm 27 years old and I recently got diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis in December 2025. I am not a medical professional. I'm simply sharing my story on how I got this diagnosis and also because Hashimoto's is a number one autoimmune disease in the US and many people are misdiagnosed or some people go up to 10 years without knowing they have Hashimoto's, partly because a lot of the symptoms overlap with other conditions. For me, the most obvious symptoms began in 2023 and after seen many specialists, many doctors, a lot of confusion, a lot of back and forth, and asking myself, what the heck is going on with my body? I finally got some clarity. What is Hashimoto's? Hashimoto's is also known as Hashi's for short, and it is a lifelong condition. We all have a thyroid gland in this general area of our body, in the front of the neck. Our thyroid gland is responsible for producing many hormones that we need for growth, metabolism, digestion, mood, body temperature, etc. Oh, and heart rate. And essentially, your thyroid is regulated by TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone, which is made by the brain. If your thyroid is not making enough hormones, basically your brain sends signals to basically push your thyroid to do more work. And that's why a high TSH can mean a underactive thyroid. And Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition. That means essentially Hashimoto's is not a thyroid problem. It's actually your immune system. Your immune system is responsible and essentially is at the forefront of battling sicknesses, illnesses, pathogens. Your immune system is basically making sure that you're fighting off any sicknesses. With Hashimoto's, your immune system mistakenly attacks your thyroid and produces antibodies, specifically TPO antibodies. And over time, since your immune system is attacking your thyroid and mistakenly attacking this, thinking it's a foreign object, and essentially your immune system is damaging your thyroid, where your thyroid is no longer able to produce these hormones. And when that happens, it can lead to hypothyroidism, which is essentially an underactive thyroid. After I got the news, I did some more research and I looked and dove deeper into Hashimoto's and how you get it, or if it's genetic or if you develop it over time. And what I learned is that Hashimoto's can be both genetic and environmental. So essentially, if you have a family history that has thyroid issues or thyroid cancer, that is why it can be genetic. And then there's certain life factors that can act as triggers. Some of these triggers can look different on everyone, and everyone has a different state of reacting to stress, etc. But some of these life factors or these triggers can be stress, chronic stress, major hormonal shifts, inflammation in the body, nutrient deficiencies, or environmental exposures. I was also diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I now take levothyroxine, which is a synthetic hormone that replaces the thyroid hormone T4 that my body cannot produce on its own. And yes, my mind went there. I didn't take the news very well at first. It didn't really hit me, not until later that night. And yes, I went there. I did research. And no, we do not live a shorter life. People with Hashimoto's can live a long and healthy life as long as there's lifestyle changes, diet, and moving forward with intention with your health and your mind, body, and soul. But at the same time, once the news really hit me, it was more of a relief because now I was finally able to put a name on what the heck was going on with my body. So when your body is out of homeostasis or when it's out of balance, your body will give you signals. And at the beginning of my health journey, I was ignoring these signals and I was brushing it off. I was like, oh, it's just stress. Oh, it's just that time of the month. Oh, I'm just PMSing today. But looking back, my body was telling me and giving me a lot of signals since as early as 2023. So here are some of the symptoms that I've experienced. And I just want to say that not everyone will get the same symptoms as another person that has Hashimoto's, but there are a few most common symptoms or some symptoms I do not get. And I just hope that this brings awareness to you all, especially if you have a headache or you feel out of balance or you something's not normal, or if something doesn't feel normal, because that is your body telling you something. And our body very much does love us and it fights for us. So after going through this experience, I very much still do love my body, and I'm very grateful for all the love that I have in my life. So, some of the symptoms I've experienced is IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, and SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, bloating and acid reflux, which is can be a combination of IBS and SIBO, sensitivity to cold, mood swings, depression, anxiety, night sweats, irregular periods, anemia, joint and wrist pain, dry and itchy skin, and fatigue. And it wasn't until my second visit with my endocrinologist was when I got the news that I have Hashimoto's. So, at the beginning of my health journey, my very first symptoms began in 2023. This is when I first experienced IBS, SIBO, acid reflux, heartburn, and severe bloating. At the time, I was working a very stressful job. I was previously a civil engineer and I was under a lot of stress. And over time, I noticed some issues of like just being able to eat. I would get stomach pain. I was very bloated. It got to the point where I no longer was able to eat a lot of things and I was only able to eat oatmeal with water. And knowing me, I have a huge love towards food. So it was as if like a lot or my whole life was taken away from me because I was not able to eat comfortably or how I used to eat. My stomach issues, my digestive issues were so bad that I literally told my family that I thought I had parasites. But the doctor confirmed that I did not have parasites, but they prescribed omeprazole for heartburn. And it got to the point where when I was working this job, I had to take really long walks after lunch so that I can get rid of the bloating or alleviate some of the symptoms or some of the pain. And I ended up losing my job because I was performing very bad. And looking back at it, it was actually a blessing in disguise because the week I lost my job was one of the hardest weeks with my stomach and it was very painful. It was a blessing because my body was forcing me to slow down. It said like, okay, well, you did not want to stop and take breaks and rest and you wanted to work while eating. So one, you're going to lose your job. Two, I'm going to force you to rest. And this is when I saw my GI specialist and she diagnosed me with IBS and SIBO. And this was the year when I learned that when you're in stress, you produce cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And that can be very beneficial when you're in like fight or flight. It can be very helpful when you have adrenaline. And I learned that when you're in stress for a very long time, it becomes chronic stress to the point where your cortisol levels are so high that a lot of these other organs and especially your digestive system is not working properly because you have such high elevated cortisol levels. But now that I know that I have Hashimoto's, I learned that IBS and SIBO can be very early signs of Hashimoto's. Essentially, digestive issues can show up early in autoimmune conditions. In October 2023, I was diagnosed with IBS and SIBO. However, at the beginning of 2023, I was experiencing a lot of acid reflux, a lot of heartburn, but at the time, it was my very first time experiencing these symptoms. So I was like, okay, it's normal. Or I was just pushing it off to the side to the point where I was like, I don't have time to go to the doctor. I need to work. I have stuff to do. I will just brush it off to the side. And it got so bad that I was no longer able to eat and work at the same time. I had to take breaks after I eat and really force myself to walk. So this was the year that my body forced me to slow down, which I am now implementing into my life. And yes, sometimes I still want to go, 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 but your body needs rest. It needs to rest and digest versus always being in a chronic flight or flight. which is chronic stress. Now, 2025, my bad, 2024. This was the year I moved to New York, and this is when these other symptoms arose, and I was just in a really big funk. I had just moved to New York and I had started a new job, and I continued to dance salsa because that's what I love to do. But I noticed that I was super sensitive to cold, and I thought like, oh, perhaps it's because I moved from the West Coast to the East Coast and it snows here and I'm just like cold and my bones are hurting. I was really tired. I experienced anxiety and depression, a lot of mood swings, and at the end of the year, I was diagnosed with anemia. This year, because of my work schedule, I wasn't getting enough hours of sleep. I was getting around like 6 hours of sleep. I quickly noticed that I was really tired. I was in a funk. I had resting bitch face. What is it? I had RBF. I didn't feel like myself. I had crazy, insane mood swings. One day I was happy and at the top of the world, and the next day I was really, really low. And this was a year where I struggled with my relationship with food because I was still not able to eat what I typically used to eat. So it was like an identity crisis. A lot of the food I was able to eat was taken away. Looking back, I now know that when I don't get enough sleep, my immune system doesn't have the energy or effort to work and do what it has to do. It's struggling. It's attacking my thyroid. So this was a year that I was like, okay, I'm not getting enough sleep. However, I now know that mood swings, depression, and anxiety plays a huge role in some of the symptoms of Hashimoto's, and it most likely amplified because I was not getting enough sleep. And I quickly noticed that I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm getting 6 hours of sleep. I have friends and I know other people that have 6 hours of sleep that only get 6 hours of sleep, but they don't feel as shitty as I do. Like I am barely getting by. I feel like crap. I don't feel like myself. I am depressed and I have anxiety. So why is it that they could get away with 6 hours of sleep, but I can't? And it all makes sense now because these are symptoms of Hashimoto's. And because at the end of the year, I got diagnosed with anemia, I started iron therapy. I started taking iron supplements. Fast forwarding to 2025, which was last year, it is now January 2026. This is where my symptoms became even stronger to the point where it interfered with my daily life. So symptoms of this year, such as anemia, continued. I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I began to have irregular periods. I had a lot of wrist and forearm pain. My wrist hurts right now just holding this microphone. I am now seeing an occupational therapist to help with my wrist pain. For the first time ever, I now have dry and itchy skin, which I've never had before. And I've experienced a lot of fatigue, especially after I eat. Last year, I was diagnosed with subclinical thyroidism. I was seeing my primary care doctor to tackle my anemia and get my iron levels at a healthy level. So I was under the impression that if I got my iron levels at a healthy goal, then my TSH levels would regulate or would get to a normal level. But I didn't know then that hypothyroidism is commonly caused by Hashimoto's. So at the beginning of the year, or towards the middle of the year when I got diagnosed with hypothyroidism, I didn't know that hypothyroidism is caused by Hashimoto's. And then I started to have irregular periods in March. And I now know that when your body is out of homeostasis, and people with Hashimoto's, there is imbalances, there's hormonal imbalances. So when there's an imbalance with your thyroid, there could be a lot of other imbalances in your body. And for me, it showed up with irregular periods. So I saw my OBGYN and I thought that going on birth control would help regulate my periods. But I now know that what caused my irregular periods is my Hashimoto's. I then developed really bad wrist and forearm pain around April 2025 to the point where it interfered with my daily life. I was like, wait a minute, I am typing, I'm on the computer, but my wrist is already hurting like 10 minutes within typing and being on my phone. Sometimes even holding my phone would hurt, or putting away the dishes or putting away my clothes. So I recently moved, and during that moving process, it was very painful because I had a lot of wrist and forearm pain. I now know that with Hashimoto's, there is inflammation in the body, and this explains the inflammation in my wrist and forearm. When I first got pain in my wrist, I went to a wrist doctor. He referred me to a rheumatologist, and the rheumatologist then referred me to an endocrinologist. And in October 25, that is when I first saw my endocrinologist, where she ran some thyroid labs with antibodies. And that is when in December 2025, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. Suddenly, so many symptoms became so clear and made so much sense. Some symptoms that I forgot to bring up was that throughout the year, I experienced like itchy skin. I remember telling my boyfriend, like, babe, I think I have athlete's foot. Like my foot is really itchy, but then it went away in like a day. And so it all makes sense. And the most obvious symptom I'm getting right now in the past few months and days is my wrist and forearm pain, because Hashimoto's can cause inflammation in the body and in the joints. I've learned that my wrist is at the forefront of inflammation. I've learned that sugary foods can increase and trigger the inflammation. I am more fatigued after meals, and now I understand my body better. And what I've learned is that people with one autoimmune condition are at risk of other autoimmune conditions or diseases. They're at higher risk. So that means that I have to be very intentional with my health and my lifestyle and my diet. And there's been days where I'm like, you know what? I'm human. I want to eat sugar. I want a piece of cake or I want a cookie, and I'll eat the piece of cookie, and the next day I will be in pain. My wrist will hurt so bad. However, hopefully with my medication and monitoring my TSH levels, hopefully that will get to a healthy goal and healthy level. Hopefully those symptoms will improve. But, I've learned that I just can't get away with what I used to get away with. And you know what? And that's okay. This is my life. This is the journey. So I'm learning to listen to my body. 2026, what I call it and what my family calls it is the new year. The Gregorian New Year is in January. However, in Mexica culture, the indigenous people of Mexico, the new year is actually in March, which is when spring begins. So spring is like new beginnings. A lot of animals are born, essentially represents new beginnings. However, it is now 2026. It is the new Gregorian New Year. And 2026 is where I take back my health. I am now more self-aware of what my body can and cannot handle. And I know that if I push myself, I will get symptoms. My symptoms will get worse. However, like I said, people with Hashimoto's can live a long and healthy life as long as they make healthy lifestyle choices, diet change, they monitor their TSH levels and their antibodies levels. So 2026 is the year I take back my health. I now know that what I used to get away with, I no longer could get away with. For example, I need my 8 hours of sleep. If I don't get my 8 hours of sleep, I will feel like garbage. I will get really bad headaches. I won't feel like myself. I feel very distant, and I like being around people and I like socializing. So I just don't feel like myself. I now know that I need to implement anti-inflammatory foods in my diet because the pain will show up in my wrist, both wrists. I need to manage my stress better. I need to do my self-care at least once a week so that I can have a healthier mental health. Also checking in and doing my lab routine and my visits with my endocrinologist. And if I don't, my body lets me know very loudly. And I no longer drink alcohol, not because I don't want to. I do miss it, but because if I do drink alcohol, I'll get really bad acid reflux. I'll get heartburn and I'll feel like garbage the next day. And, I've experienced hangovers and I know what a hangover feels like, and they were bad, but now it's different. It's like my whole body hurts. My stomach is in pain. I am just like fighting for my life. And yeah, I do miss the social aspect of drinking, but I've learned that I have to respect my limits. And honestly, this experience has been very humbling because autoimmune conditions or autoimmune diseases do not discriminate based off age. Just because you're young doesn't mean you're immune to illnesses and diseases and sicknesses. But I'm grateful, and I'm grateful for the answers I've gotten. I'm grateful that I have a family that supports me, that has been there for me. I'm grateful for my partner that has been there for me for the past 4 years. For the past 4 years. And I'm grateful that I haven't given up on myself, because I think if I got the news a year ago, I wouldn't have taken it so well. So I'm grateful that I have a stronger head on my shoulders this time around. I'm grateful that I can now basically own this and be like, there's nothing I can do to go back and change things I've done, or go back in time and be like, oh, I wish I checked in on myself sooner, or I wish I ran labs sooner. There's nothing I could do to go back in time. All I can do is move forward and be more intentional with my lifestyle, with my diet, what I eat, how I manage my stress, how much sleep I get. And it's only moving forward now with intention and with compassion for my body and faith. I have to have faith in my body, in myself, in God, or in the creator, or whoever you believe God is. I have to have faith that I will be okay, and that this is my life. I love my life. I choose to live it fully with happiness, even in the ups and downs, in the good and the bad. I believe that I can live a healthy and long life with loved ones, with friends. I'm grateful for the friends that have been there for me, that have checked in on me. I'm sharing my stories so that you can all, in hope that this brings awareness to check in with yourself, check in with your mental health, and checking in with your body, because your body loves you and your body fights for you every day. Every cell in your body fights for you and loves you. And I've learned that I have to speak kindly and nicely to my body, because it will respond positively. And I believe that it responds positively when I speak nicely to my body. I just hope that you all live a healthy life, a happy life. And here's to healing. Thank you.